All right, here we go. You're up, JD.
Alright, so my computer dings, I pop up awake off my keyboard, realize it's like 5:15 in the morning and my render is finally complete. So package up my videos, render, write some last minute instructions and send it off to my client who needed the video for a presentation at 8 a.m. Wind back a little bit, it's dinner time that evening, the previous evening, and I get the call from a client who had just completed about a 6-week-long project for biggest project I've had in a while, and they say, hey, so you know that project you just finished for us? The CFO didn't like it. We have to change almost 2/3 of it. And I had to take a step back and remind them, hey, this was not within the project that I agreed to. This is huge changes, and you still need it tomorrow? Yeah, we still need it tomorrow. You realize that if I can do this at all, it's going to be very expensive. Yeah, sure, we'll do that. And you realize that if I can make this happen, somebody's going to have to stay up all night with me to receive the video in time for tomorrow morning. Yes, we'll. Okay, so once I was able to sort of set that expectation and they were okay with it, I think the project ended up going pretty well in the end. They managed to get their video on time. They could present at 8 a.m. for the conference that they were part of, and I got paid a little bit extra because I charged them for working overnight. If I had not been careful to set up those expectations when a change occurred, I think it could have ended up way worse. So what I decided to do is I figured it's kind of important to work through my branding process and figure out how I explain to people what I can do for them and set up the expectations. How I got here is a little bit of a longer process, but the short version of it, is that hang on. Yeah, that's right. Sorry, I skipped ahead here. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how I got here, and then what the project is, and then why the project is, and then obviously I'll show it to you. I ended up here by getting into a little bit of freelance and internship video editing, which inspired a massive passion for me in post-production. I really enjoy it. I worked for a 6-month internship for the digital media group that worked for Coca-Cola at the time. Lots of big name stuff going through there, and I thought that was really, really cool. And ever since then, I've just pursued it with little freelance jobs here and there wherever I could. And then I obviously came to Emmanuel doing DMP to try and learn how to do that professionally. And in the process, I also discovered that I really like graphic design. So I've just used whatever I can to try and put those two together, and my senior project has ended up being sort of an amalgamation of both of those. What it ends up being is I've done a series of short videos that walks a client through my process. I took the opportunity to practice branding, which is part of my graphic design, but also then create sort of a tutorial / just a video that I can show them practicing video production and both the live and the post-production side of that. And obviously I'd like to be able to put this on maybe YouTube or something like Skillshare where I can demonstrate, hey, not only can I produce this, but this is how my process is so that other people have a more complete understanding of what I do. Well, I mean, why it is like I've mentioned, explain the process sets up expectations for the client. Then they don't have a question of, hey, are you going to deliver this or not? It also sets up for myself, I know I'm going to be giving these things and I need to work towards these goals at these deadlines rather than it being a vague, sure, I'll just make a video for you. Setting up something ahead of time, knowing what you're going to deliver and how is obviously how the project works best, and I needed a senior project, so I figured I'd make it something that is useful and practical going forward, and I'd like to continue freelancing, so that's a good opportunity for me. Now, I guess I'll attempt to show you guys the video. Let me hit the lights. Is that the right one? Cool.
You know what? Turn the back ones off too.
Okay.
Anyone who has worked with a client would likely agree that expectation management through clear deliverables and good communication are crucial to a successful project. It's only natural that as a client you want to know where your money's going, what's being worked on, and most importantly, when are you going to get your product. My purpose with this video is to share with you today what you can expect from me. My process generally fits into 6 overarching steps. First, meet with the client. Second, do some research and create a mood board. Third, draft up some sketches. Fourth, digitize the best sketches. Fifth, refine and polish the client's favorite version. And then sixth, take that version and convert it into a branding guide. Step 1 is the client brief. Here's where my research actually begins. I like to meet with the client and get to know them a bit. I like to find out everything I can about the product or service that they offer. I then also like to ask where in the branding process they are. Am I creating a new brand? Am I taking an existing brand and redesigning it? Or maybe they have a product line that I'm creating a sub-brand for. This is also when I will go ahead and set up guidelines and deliverables so that they know what to expect from me, and find out if they have any preferences as to what I should include in the brand, maybe fonts or colors or even shapes. I can't guarantee that they'll be in the final product, but if I know what they're interested in, what they like, I can try and work it in. Secondary objectives that are easier to find out directly from the client rather than personal research is the target audience, and also any previous branding or advertisement materials they may have had. Step 2, research and mood boarding. Here's where I gather all my ideas and inspirations. I like to put images, shapes, textures, colors, fonts, and sometimes even a word list that represent what I want the design to say. To me, obviously, the mood board is more than just an inspiration box. It's also something that I can share with the client so that they can check off and make sure I am going down the same path that they want the design to be. Step 3, sketching drafts. This is where I look at the mood board for inspiration and then try and sketch out everything that comes to mind. All designs are valid, I just want to empty my mind, get everything onto a piece of paper. I'll then generally take a break from it for an afternoon or maybe come back the next day and then try and push for 2 or 3 more sketches. And these often end up being the most creative and the most useful. Step 4, digitization and refinement. This is my favorite part. I pick the best 3 or maybe 4 designs, and then I scan them into the computer for digitization. I bring them into Illustrator and recreate all the paths in vector form. This is when I then start to see the images really come to life. I'll take a little break, come back after lunch, do another iteration of each one, and then another, and eventually I have 3 or 4 versions of each design. Once I have the designs 90% of the way there, I'll put them into PDFs and try and meet with the client to get some feedback. Step 5, final changes and polishing. This is where I take the feedback from the client and use their favorite logo with any last minute changes. I polish it off to make sure it looks good in monochrome black and white, as well as in color. Make sure it looks good large and small for both print and digital versions. And sometimes if they want embroidery, make sure that it'll convert to that well too. And finally, step 6 wraps it up with the branding guide. This is where the client gets the final version of the logo and a guide that explains what font is used with, what kind of spacing it should have, what color palette it has, and when to use a monochrome version of the logo.
Striking. Alrighty, so I showed you the thing. The purpose of this, obviously, is nice and simple. I'd like to be able to give a prospect client this video to look at, and then they can very quickly decide, hey, is this going to cover what we need or not? And very easily have a structure to know what to deviate from. So today, I've gone over for you how I got to this point. I went and explained what the actual project is, and then why I've created the project. And then also, obviously, showed you guys the project. As I continue with improving my skill and my ability to set expectations for clients and do freelancing, there's something that's always stuck in my mind, and I'd like to keep it as my refrain, is something that Winston Churchill said. And that is that success consists of going from failure to failure without the loss of enthusiasm. I think that's a fascinating way of looking at it. You're going to fail a bunch of times, but if you keep going from one to the other, eventually you'll strike on something that's successful, and that's the product that you want to end up showing off. Thank you very much for your time, guys. Do we have any questions? Yes?
How many complete products you already did?
I have, how many complete products that I finished branding so far?
Yeah.
I think I've done 4 branding products so far, all the way through. Each one of those ended up with like 2 or 3 iterations, but I only really finished, for the branding guide, only one version, which the client liked the most. Thank you.
Do you want to continue with that in your future?
Yeah, I would really like to continue. Branding is a type of thing that I really enjoy the process of. You really have to get into knowing the product and the service, and if it's something that I can get behind, then learning enough about it to be able to create a brand that converts that product into a message that's just a little picture is a really cool challenge to me. So yeah, I'd love to keep going on with that. Yes?
What was the biggest challenge you ran into?
With this project?
Either any project you did.
Ooh, biggest challenge. Well, with my senior project, I've run into all sorts of different little hurdles, like most people would. But the biggest one for me was that I had a massive equipment failure. I had one of the recordings that I did basically got corrupted and or vanished. So I had to go back and do the entire process again. And I found out too late in the process that that had occurred, so I had to reschedule all the different parts and the equipment rather than just being able to check it right afterwards, which I should have. And I knew better because I've made this mistake before, but you know, inevitably it happens. That was my biggest frustration with this one. Yes?
What do you like most and least about branding?
I think the thing I like the least about branding is having to push myself to come up with ideas. I struggle with brainstorming the initial batch. When I write down that word list and look at that mood board, I can put together the different pieces of what inspires a logo, and I can come up with a logo in my mind, but getting that onto a piece of paper where I can then look at that image on itself, on its own, and then it still transfer that data to me or to the viewer, I struggle a lot with that. I find that to be real challenging, but it's also my favorite part, because when I manage to get past that next step and I digitize it and I find one that I think really looks good, I hit on, oh wow, that nails it, that says that word and that meaning together and it represents the brand, that gets me like really excited and passionate. Yes?
How do you make sure a product works with embroidery?
A product works with it?
Embroidery?
Oh, there are a couple things that you can look out for when you're trying to make sure that a brand will, or a logo specifically, will work with embroidery. You want to make sure that the edges are not super thin, that they have enough space there that when the embroidery machine tries to detect through that logo, it's actually finding enough of a line to make embroidery space. Otherwise, if it's too thin, it'll think that there's nothing actually there. So it's really just sort of a bunch of checklists that go through. Nothing needs to be too close to each other. All the lines need to be at least a certain thickness, and usually it needs to work well in a monochrome. So if it's something that distinguishes 2 colors next to each other, the embroidery is not always going to show that very well. So you want to give it a little bit of space. Good question. Thank you. Are there any others?
All right. Next we have Brandon Burdick and his promotional video for Res Life.
Yeah.
All right. Coming right up.
Stepped out, so he didn't make it back in.
Oh. Let's see. Good job, Jenny.
Thank you. I do too. They're comfy.
Good? Use the bathroom. Did you shut the door? Yeah, that's recording pictures.
Getting like cabin fever.
Good job this morning. Got your information. I haven't.
So going into like
Everybody was going to search by color.
so yeah, just introduce it to you. I'll
I don't know.
here it is right here. So all you guys do is right here.
I don't see how the project number.
I'll play the video.